Torah or Megillah Esther 196, second column, 10, 11 lines in the bottom of the page. Okay, now the Rebbe is explaining where did Yidden get this chus from Matan Torah to have the Moshel HaKadmoni. Oh, by the way, today's class is sponsored by Moshe Mataban in honor of his birthday, which is today. So, one second. So it says, where did they get this Moshel HaKadmoni? Mean to bring down the level of Kadmoni Shalom, which is higher than Mamala, Sefer, higher than everything in the world. He says it comes from Nasav and Ishma. And he explained that the level of Nasav and Ishma is the level of Bittul, and that's the level of a Gilui Mumayla, of Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis, that Hashem revealed that great level of Elokus to them in a way that caused them to reach the level of Nasav and Ishma, because otherwise they had nothing in Egypt. So he says now, V'zau inyan Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis. That's what it means, Kaf Aleim. What does it mean, Kaf Aleim? That's the level of Aval Yaina Shenikra Har. Avram Avinu, the pasuk calls him Har, a mountain. Now Avram Avinu is the level of Ava. So Har is the level of Ava. Now Kaf Aleim Har Kegigis, Hashem held a mountain over their head. That's the Gilui of Hava, El Yaina, a love from above that made that happen. And why did even Gigis? Gigis is a barrel. What's a barrel? A barrel is round, and it surrounds everything in it. So that represents the level of Sefer Kol Almin. Okay, and he says like this. I'm going to learn this parenthesis because it's interesting. This answers the question. When you do a wedding, the bracha is Mekadosh Am Yisrael de Chuppah v'Kiddushin. Sanctifies the Jews through chuppah and kedushin. Now normally the order is reversed. First you have kedushin, hariyat mekadeshusli, and then you have the chuppah. In the time of the Gemara, it's 12 months apart. V'hikshu, and the question Mefarshim asked, Lo mashini aseder, lahaktim chuppah lekedushin. Why do you first say chuppah then kedushin? This first is kedushin then chuppah. Elaki chuppah b'chinas makif. Chop is a level of makif, which is Kaf Aleim Hagigilis, which is this galus of makif. Therefore, you have to say Chop Kedushin, because in order to come to the level of Kedushin, the Kabbalah Tzatayra, which is the level of Kedushin, you have to have the level of makif, the level of Chuppah. Now, the whole inyan of Kedushin is through the level of makif of Makaf Aleim Hakagigis. Now, this is what it means. What the Gemara says, simply when the Gemara says Hashem held the mountain over the head, right? So the Gemara says, now is a good cop out for people to say we didn't willingly accept Torah, we are forced, we are coerced, we have an excuse not to keep Torah. See, so what expression Meidor Rabba Le'iraisa? Meidor Rabba means a great knowledge for the and knowledge for the Torah. He says, I know this awakening in their heart. The Kabbalah Satira, next page, which was complete giving over their will to Hashem. That they said Nasa before Nishma, like we said, not only a bittul to the Rotzain, but a bittul to the Baal HaRotzain, to the person himself. It wasn't from their bechinas v'rotza Hashem mi'atzmam levad. It wasn't only their doing, because the Jews were on a level of no keli to be able to say this level Nasa v'Nishma. There are no mitzvahs. Elai de gili milmaila of a half the eschem Hashem says I love you, which is the mountain over their head. I deza davka niser b'emarot v'yava. So that's mikam haidor rabba l'raisa means it was a great revelation, haidor, a great revelation from above for Torah. So they were forced, but nevertheless, afal became hard to be killed b'rotzin gam b'mei Achashverosh. What did Achashverosh, the Jews at the time of Achashverosh, accomplish? because Hoya Mesiris Nefesh B'chol Yisrael Me'atzmam Shlo Yadei Yisraelis Ma'ile B'tchilam. Purim, the Jews stood with Mesiris Nefesh. There was no Gilui M'mayla. Forget, if anything, the Jews were in a very deep golus. The whole reign of Achashverosh, and he threw the party, was because he thought the 70 years were up, and they're not building the Beis HaMikdash. So if it's anyway, it was a very deep golus. Yet the Jews on their own came to the level of Mesiris Nefesh. So that means like this. Matan Torah was Mesiris Nefesh of Nasa and Ishmael, but that came Momayla. Purim was Momata L'mayla. Purim came from the Jews themselves. Then it was a concealment, like it says, Esther, he asked it, in the days of Esther was a terrible Hester of Elokus. Therefore it was Mesiris Nefesh by themselves. So the Rebbe is explaining what Matan Torah is all about. It's the Gilui of Kadmoni that needed to be accomplished through Nasa v'Nishma. By Matan Torah, though, the Nasa v'Nishma did not come on their own. It came from above, the stimulation from above. But that wasn't good, because Hashem wants the Jews to accept Torah. Not Hashem revealing to them to accept Torah. Hashem wants that the Jews themselves should accept Torah. That's why in the days of Purim, when every single Jew in every single country in the world had Mesiris Nefesh for Yiddishkeit, a whole year, that means under any circumstance, right, the 4 seasons, they would still be connected to Hashem, but that came from themselves.
But at Matan Torah, they already had some before.
Very few.
So they had the Keli.
They didn't have the Keli. That's why Parchan Nishmasim. They weren't able to handle it. Every word Hashem said, the Hashem popped out of the body, right? Why? Why? Because they couldn't handle it. They weren't the Keli for it. Hashem was upset. When the Jews told me, yeah, you speak, we can't handle it. Hashem was upset. I'm doing it. Obviously you could do it, right? You could do it. So he's saying that Hashem stop it. But obviously Hashem did it. Hashem didn't know what they could take or not take. So the Purim was a Gilu Momato L'mayla, the Mesiris Nefesh of Purim. That's what the Rebbe explains in Natan Tetzaveh. Why was Matan Torah only the beginning? So the Rebbe explains, Mesiris Nefesh causes more, and that's Matan Torah. Okay, so he says, Obir Inyan, to explain this, Yuvan, Alpi Masha Kosu, what the Pasuk says in the Megillah, wow, a really long moment. Ish Yehudi, Yait Ushmai Mordechai Ish Yemini. Okay, so right away the Mefarshim ask, Ish Yehudi simply means he came from Yehuda. And then it says Ish Yemini, he came from Binyamin. So the Gemara asks, the Yemini is Shevet Binyamin, like Rashi says. And why is he called Yehudi? Hashem Shevet Yehuda. Right? So all the Mefarshim ask this question. The Gemara asks the question. If the pasuk seems to be contradicting themselves. Gam tzarich lahavin, the begzeira samen by gzeira samen. It says lashmin la'arigal ha'habira Yehudim. Okay? All Yehudim, and again, Yehudi simply means from Shevet Yehuda. But Arisheva Vesemamei Medina Malchus Achashverosh was all Kol Hashvatim, Ephraim and Menashe, Ela Shenikru Kulam Yehudim. Yet all the Jews are called Yehudim from Yehuda, right? So in fact, there's a lot of answers to the question. His mother came from Yom, his father came from Yehuda, reverse, whatever it was. But the answer is Yehudi doesn't mean Yehuda. It means Kaifa Baveda Zora, Umayda B'chol Haydah, Bittul. Nikra Kulam Yehudim. Why are they called Yehudim? B'chinas Bittul Sheyesh B'am L'Eretz Baruch Hu. The bittul dehat Hashem. Yehuda means hoda'ah. Meidem anachnu loch means we submit. The Rabbi explained, Chassidus explains, the Rebbe says they all say. We say meidem anachnu loch. Meidem means two things. Number one, I thank you. Meidanil fanacha. Yeah? But meidem means when I admit to you. Moda, I'm moda to you. That means we have a disagreement. Like Gemara says, meida chacham l'Rab Meir, meida Rab Meir l'chachamim. Yeah, that means when I'm moda to you, means I submit myself to you. We have different opinions. Okay, and I say you're right and I'm wrong. That's Haidah, that's Bittul.
Why is it plural? Why is it not singular?
What?
Modin, anachnu. I'm modin.
1 second. Every part of Shemona Esrei is plural. Rifa'enu, it doesn't say Rifa'eni. Chaneinu mi'itcha chachma bin. Because when you daven with the community, you answered better. Torah teaches them not to be selfish pigs. It's not all about me. It's all about us. Everything in the Shemona Esrei is us.
Is any all milvadi? Is not all any all milvadenu?
Yeah. A lot of people that literal, Einod Movadi. But, and by the way, in Meidani, we say Taka Meidani. Singular. But Meidani Lefanacha, we don't say Meidam Anachnu Lefanacha. Because here we're thanking Hashem, She'achzar Kabdi Nishmasi, it's a different Eidah. But Klal Yisrael is thanking Hashem for all the miracles that He does to us. He says, K'mei Shanaim B'Shemona Esrei, Meidam Anachnu Lo Shal Shem Zenikri Yehudi. The Yidden are called Yehudi. In fact, the Gemara says, why are they called Yehudim? Whoever is Kaifer B'Avodah Zarah, by the way, and it's another interesting thing. Avodah Zarah, we learned many times. Chassidus doesn't say, in the Gemara, by the way, it says always Avodah Salilim. Avodah Salilim means, Alilim are gods, idols. Avodah Salilim normally means worshipping other gods. But in our language, we call it Avodah Zarah. Now, Zarah doesn't mean idols. Zarah means foreign. So Chassidus explains, why is Avodah Zarah called Avodah Zarah? It should be called like the Gemara says, Avodah Salilim. So Chassidus explains, Avodah Zarah doesn't mean worshipping idols. Zarah means foreign, which means as follows. If you're supposed to be davening, and you're learning, right now, it's Avodah Zarah. It's foreign to you, because that's not what you're supposed to be doing now. Now you're supposed to be davening, you don't learn. If you're learning, you don't go daven. Okay? So anything the Jew does not, it could be holy. But if it's foreign for the Jew at that moment, it's called Mamash Avodah Zarah.
Even in Kedusha.
Even in Kedusha. That's why it's called Avodah Zarah. If a person, according to Torah, is supposed to daven, right? Now's the time for davening. And they go learn, that's foreign to what they're supposed to be doing. It doesn't say evil. Machshava Zara, foreign thoughts, doesn't necessarily mean evil thoughts. If a guy in the middle of davening thinks about a Rambam instead of concentrating on the tefillah, that's Machshava Zara. Halavai, we have that problem, by the way. That should be our problem. That's our problem with thinking about Rambam instead of davening. Okay? But the bottom line is, Avodah Zarah means foreign, Machshava Zarah means, it says, by Purim, the Medrash says, also Machshavas Chutz. For a whole year, they never had a foreign thought, God forbid, to give in to Haman.
It says Avodah Zarah, it doesn't say Machshava Zarah.
No, there's Avodah Zarah, there's Machshava Zarah, but it says Machshavas Chutz, about Purim. They never even had any thought to give in to Haman. So that's why it's called Yehudi. Okay? What?
All the Jews were like that?
Yeah. All the Jews have Mesiras Nefesh. That was the uniqueness of Purim. And it didn't come from above, like Matan Torah did. Hashem held the mountain over there, gave him the slava of Ava. On their own, that's what Mordechai HaTzadik did. Mordechai HaTzadik accomplished more than Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe says. Because Moshe Rabbeinu's time didn't have Mesiras Nefesh. And the Mesiras Nefesh they had of Nasav and Ishma was because of a revelation from above. And Purim, Mordechai HaTzadik, that was his greatness over Moshe Rabbeinu, that was a real causes.
4/5 of the Jews didn't want to leave Egypt.
Correct.
And in the Purim time, everybody was
good.
So they were Persian.
No, it says in all the countries.
Under Persian.
Don't convince yourself that. And he says, like Leah said, Apam Eidas Hashem. L'chein nikr Mordechai Ish Yehudi. Therefore, he's called Ish Yehudi. Now we know in Torah, Ish means a man, but Ish means the officer in charge. He says, Peter Sar La Yehudim. There was a guy Ish Harabayis. You know, the Kohanim and Leviim watched in 24 places. And then the Mishnah says there was a Ish Harabayis, a man in charge. He was the officer, walked around, made sure nobody was sleeping at night, right? So Ish means Sad. Rashi also says in Chumash. Ish, means an officer. What does it mean? Ish Harabayis, Ish Yehudi. That means Mordechai was the source of Yehudi of Bittul. Like we said, Mordechai, the Rebbe explained in Atuk Tosava, that Mordechai accomplished Kamayim and Azal, Mordechai min HaTorah minayin. Where do we know? Esther, we said, Anechi Aster Aster. Where do we know Mordechai from the Torah? Because it says Mordorod, right? One of the spices is Mordorod, and Targum says Mirodachya, which is Mordechai. So make sure, Mordechai was this level. Umar Zal Ladasa Meforshim. And the Rambam and other Meforshim say it means Mushak, which in Persian means a mouse, right? Mushk. Anyway.
Yeah, it means what?
But the Rebbe spoke after the Rebbe passed away, that the name Mushka is sourced in Torah. It's one of the spices of the Torahs. Mordorod, it means Mushka. Ketzad Mavarshu Dam Chay Yedua. It's the blood of a chaya shenikrish b'chateta shebetzavara that becomes what's the word for glivid? It becomes gelled in the neck and it becomes a spice called mar.
Mosh in Persian means something that smells very, very good.
Okay, somebody told me it means a mouse. Vainu b'midas.
That's mush.
Okay, mush. No. I know, but me, the Sanafesh in the level of the scarf, you received Hachla. Me berid or lemisko. The expression of Chassidus, you break evil and you transform meridu lemisku, bitterness to sweetness. So what does mordadachi mean? Transforming of more bitter, which normally mar means bitter, and you transform it to a spice of the keteiros. Meridu lemiski adam or nefesh achiyunis, nefesh amisava, the nefesh that desires. When you transform the taivus of the nefesh abamis, that's the level of beishim. That's the level of a spice. Ultimate spice is when you take something like chelbana that stunk, or mar into mud. That's transformation of bitter to sweet. How to explain this? This spice of mud is an argument in Allah if you're allowed to eat it, because it comes from the blood of that animal, right? So he says Rabbeinu Yaina permits it even to eat. And some people say you're not allowed to eat it. The sfira shel nisapach elo reichei avol gufei ase b'achila. And the ri sfira shechaza legamri liyaset. And that he brings down okay up. So he says he's going to explain this machlekes according to Chassidus. Whether mod is mutter b'achila or only b'hana. Now, generally speaking, before we learn this, I have to explain the introduction to this concept. We learn something forbidden is shalosh kibsat tameis. Right? So like chazir is shalosh kibsat tameis. Right? It means you can't elevate it. Right? Shalosh kibsat tameis, you can't elevate it. But chazir, you can benefit from. You can't eat it, but you can have a belt, pigskin belt, you can have a football pigskin, you can have whatever. Other foods, like meat and milk together, which is also today for the shalosh kibsat tameis, but not only you're not allowed to eat it, you're not allowed to benefit from it either. So what's the difference? What's the difference that this can eat, you can't eat, but you can benefit, and this you can't even benefit from? So, Chassidus explains, I think not that I was going to go into this now. Chassidus explains like this. Something which is forbidden to eat, but you can benefit from, means the klip, shalosh kibsat tameis, didn't permeate it through and through, that you can't even benefit from it. And that means, if somebody, let's say, uses a football to play with kids and be makadev them to Yiddishkeit, right? You play a game with them, then they all put on tefillin, so then you elevated the pig. The eating aspect of it, but it doesn't permeate through and through that you can't benefit from. Bachim in 770 once went to Hawaii somewhere, Friday after years ago, to put on tefillin with a bunch of kids. They had in the middle of a basketball game. So the guy, it was like 10 kids playing basketball, whatever. So the Bachim came and they said, put on tefillin. They said, no. So the Bachim said, we'll challenge you to a game. If we win, you put on tefillin. If we lose, you don't put on tefillin. So the kids got all excited. The Bachim smeared them. And they all put on tefillin. So what did they do? The basketball, okay, basketball's not treif, but I'm saying, it would be football, let's say. So then the football was elevated to Kedusha. Shalosh kibsat tameis, because it didn't permeate the essence of it. Just the external eating part can be elevated. Something which is totally forbidden, even bahana, so then you can't, it's so permeated with evil, you can't even, anything of it can be elevated. Here the Alter Rebbe is explaining a little different aspect. Mod is an argument if you could eat it or not. So he said, what's the argument according to Chassidus? So he says like this. Machlakos amal piach Chassidus toli begemar and this begemar yuma gabi tshuva im zdeinis nasi kishagos ekazachias. Whether it's not really an argument though. He doesn't say argument. In the Gemara says like this: there's tshuva me'yira, there's tshuva me'ava. The lowest level of tshuva is the intentional sins become accidental. A higher level of tshuva is deinis nasa lekazachias. The Vedas become mitzvah. Okay, so what's the difference in this concept of different levels of tshuva? Tshuva that intentional becomes accidental means it wasn't transformed to kedusha. It's just not the same level of evil as an intentional sin is. Intentional sin is more evil than an accidental sin, obviously, because you're rebelling. But if it becomes transformed, that means you transformed the whole essence of the sin to become a mitzvah. So he says like this: Ki shneim inyan echad shuara nepach l'tayv. Sherechayo Yedua now is called Yid'eni. This Chaya that's called Yedua, the Gemara says was the animal called the Yid'eni, and the pasuk says She'el Evi Yid'eni V'Deir Shalmesim. It was one of the witchcrafts. People used to do witchcraft with it, and that thing was transformed to Mar, which is one of the Torahs of the Beis Hamikdash. He says on this, but Tasheisha Meklip is a Tmeis like it's ever shel every day Shalameis. Lachin Zeh Shoya Beisim Alos. Therefore, when the transformation came, that it became the Torahs, Muter Afilu Ba'achila. It became even permitted to eat. Why? because that's the transformation, making it Keteiros, transformed that it became mitzvahs. If they became mitzvahs, then you can eat it. It's not klipa anymore. Which is, by the way, the highest level of tshuva. That does dainis become mitzvahs. Just the lower level of tshuva from Yira, because Gogis, is teif. And therefore it says, the question is like this. Did the more through making it a Keteiros, did it become Kazachias, or it only came against Shgogis? If it became Kazachias, it means it was mamish transformed.
After being used as a Torah.
You have a similar machlekes in the Gemara. When you're allowed to, the Torah says if you're b'koach nefesh, you're allowed to do things. Right? You can eat treif for b'koach nefesh. Right? So there's a whole argument. It's based on Gemaras and a lot of in the Rishonim and Achreinim. Does it mean it became kosher, or Torah says it's treif and you could eat it? By the way, in both cases you make a brach on it, because Torah says you're allowed to eat it. But the question is, did it become kosher? Or is it treif that became allowed by tchuya, what's called pushed away the isur? Or is it hutra that it become permissible? Chassidus is a very interesting thing. Did it become kedusha? Or there says it's treif, but you can eat it. Question, how much is it elevated? Whatever, all the...
Milk and beef are
Rabbi, let me-
worse than other.
It's also, no, you can't even benefit from